Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to any new members who may be watching my live tonight. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. And of course, if you are one of my supporters who are catching up watching this on my podcast or in my YouTube channel, thank you for listening. So this week I'm focusing on bone health. It's June is National Osteoporosis Month. We need to think about that as prevention. We need to always think about preventative measures that we can take. And that's what I want to share with you tonight. And I called this post, my post on my live, but it's not just about calcium, because what concerns me is the assumption that all the time is if we keep eating lots of dairy, if we keep getting the calcium in our diet, then we're doing everything we can to ensure our bones are going to remain strong, or certainly to help protect against osteoporosis. But what I want to explain, and it's certainly through my training, is just opening up your awareness that it's far more than just consuming calcium that you need to consider. And actually, if you just focus on that calcium intake, it can really be counterproductive. It's really important that I share this with you. Now, bone mass does decrease over the age of 40. And for ladies going through the menopause, when we start to lose estrogen, and therefore the estrogen receptors we have within bone, then the potential is that ladies are at, and myself, greater risk of osteoporosis as we get older. But it doesn't mean that because you're getting older, you will get osteoporosis. So it's really important that we think of all the factors and all the steps that we can follow to really make sure that we're looking after our bones as we get older. So I like to break these down into steps that you can follow. So these are my 5 steps. It's not just about pure nutrition that I'm going to talk about here. And I hope I present this in a way that really makes sense to you, and you'll go away and think about all these things that you need to do. Number 1 is about vitamin D supplementation. Now, vitamin D is needed for our bones because you need vitamin D to take the calcium that you're getting from your food, from the gut, and to help that calcium be absorbed into the bloodstream, from where it can then get into your bones. If you lack sufficient vitamin D, then you may not be extracting all that calcium from your foods and getting it into your bones. So that's really, really important. First of all, you've got to have the calcium available in the blood, but to get it from the food sources, or indeed supplements. You know, if you've been advised to take supplements these days, it usually comes now, calcium comes with vitamin D, because it's finally been recognized that vitamin D is crucial to get that calcium out of the gut and into the bloodstream. Now, if you live in the northern hemisphere, then you need to be aware that the only way that you get sufficient vitamin D is through the absorption of sunlight on your skin to activate vitamin D within the body. But we do not get nearly sufficient sunlight and those UVB rays to get that vitamin D. You may have heard that you should supplement vitamin D through the winter months. And I would suggest that you supplement it all year round. And the recommended amount that I hear that you should take, and I've heard this from a senior pharmacist when I gave a presentation to her group, is that you should take 1,000 IU of vitamin D3, and you should take it all year round. I'm recording this in June in 2023, and so far this year we've had very little sunlight. Indeed, it is now June and it's freezing cold, and we're going around in long sleeves, and you need that direct exposure of sun on your skin without suntan lotion to really get the vitamin D. We just don't get it in the UK and in that northern hemisphere particularly. So I really recommend 1,000 IU of vitamin D3. Now, the rest I'm going to talk about isn't so much supplementation. Number 2, keep your magnesium levels high. The tendency is to focus on calcium. And indeed, in terms of minerals, then we know that calcium is the most important in the bone itself. But like we need to get calcium from the gut and into the bloodstream, we've then got to get calcium from the bloodstream and into bone. Now, magnesium is important to synthesize vitamin D in the first place, but it's also been found to be really important to slow down the bone breakdown that happens and to encourage bone building activity. There are these things called osteoblasts and osteoclasts, and we need to make sure that's constant. It's this bone modeling, remodeling that goes on all the time. And what we want to do is to try and stop too much bone breakdown going on that releases calcium back into the bloodstream, and that we optimize the amount of bone building activity that takes place, that takes the calcium back up into the bone. And you need magnesium to really enhance the bone building activity. And without it, you may end up with calcium lingering in the bloodstream, unable to, properly get into bone. And that calcium in the bloodstream has to go somewhere. And actually, if there's too much calcium and not enough of the cofactors like magnesium, and I'm focusing on magnesium because it's such an important mineral in the body and for bone health, is that the calcium can linger in the bloodstream. It has to go somewhere. And the places that calcium can be deposited is into joints, making your joints really painful. And it can also be deposited within the arteries that can be part and parcel of arteriosclerosis. You do not want calcium being deposited in the bloodstream, and you do not want it being deposited in your joints. So you really want to maximize the balance between calcium foods and magnesium foods. Now, the magnesium-rich foods that you should be eating in abundance in your diet on a daily basis is those dark green leafy vegetables like broccoli, cabbage, and kale. You need to eat an abundance of those foods. You also need to be eating nuts and seeds and whole grains, in particular, something like brown rice and maybe oats as well. I'll come back to oats later on, but things like brown rice, really important. And those dark green leafy vegetables that we need to be eating in abundance anyway, but think about those, not just because they're rich also in calcium. Yes, we get calcium from other sources, not just from dairy, but because they are also rich in magnesium and provide that very nice balance between calcium and magnesium that you need. My third point is you need to address low stomach acid to take care of your bone health. Now, in my clinical experience, people generally tend to be low on stomach acid and not too high. And it is a fact that as we get older, we tend to lose digestive secretions. They start to become less optimal as we get older, and that includes your stomach acid levels. The reason why we need good stomach acid levels is again to do with mineral availability. So things like calcium and magnesium, they have to be ionized to be in their most bioavailable form, to be absorbed from the gut into the bloodstream. And stomach acid enables that to happen. And therefore, I think we need to be very, very cautious of people taking proton pump inhibitors. And I've seen the label inside the box to do with things like omeprazole and lansoprazole that actually says you shouldn't be on these for long periods of time because it can affect your bones. And this is a reason why it can affect your bones. It can inhibit the ability to absorb calcium and magnesium and other minerals from the gut and into your bloodstream. So be careful about using proton pump inhibitors. And even if you don't, are you sure that your stomach acid levels are sufficient? If you experience bloating high up, if you experience burping after eating, if you have indigestion, these can all be signs that your stomach acid levels are too low, affecting your ability to digest food and also your ability to absorb your minerals. So think about eating mindfully, chewing your food well, trying not to eat in a stressful state, eating in a calm state, and thinking about eating some bitter foods like rocket and chicory that can really help to stimulate those digestive secretions at the start of a meal. If you're unsure about this, I've got lots of other blog posts and videos on digestive support. And of course, always think about engaging with somebody like a nutritionist who can really help you with your digestive health if you've got concerns there. Number 4 on my list is something you probably have not heard of before, but be very aware of mineral depleters. And is your diet high in mineral depleters, or also could be called mineral inhibitors? What can happen again in the gut is that calcium and other minerals can bind to certain substrates and compounds in the gut, and rather than there being freely bioavailable to be absorbed into the bloodstream, they can be excreted via the stools out of the body. You can have the best quality food in your diet, you can be taking the best quality supplements, but if you're eating these foods that are high mineral inhibitors, then you may be reducing the amount of calcium, magnesium, and other minerals that can be absorbed into the bloodstream. So what are these mineral inhibitors, depleters? We've got things known as phytates, also known as phytic acid. We've got oxalates, oxalic acid, and we've also got phosphorus and phosphoric acid. Now, where do we find these compounds? Well, phytates can actually be found in quite a lot of foods, but they're particularly rich in grains like wheat. They're particularly rich in nuts and seeds, and a little bit in oats as well. You will find oxalic acid in spinach and rhubarb, and you get phosphorus and phosphoric acid very, very high in your fizzy drinks. Also found with caffeine as well, in tea, coffee, and certain energy drinks as well. You're going to find caffeine. Well, obviously, you can avoid drinking tea and coffee. I'd suggest you avoid fizzy drinks altogether, but don't have those close to meal times first and foremost. Phosphoric acid, again, those fizzy drinks, they have no place in a healthy diet. But if you really want that treat, have something like that well away from mealtime, and it should be seen as a treat and not part and parcel of a daily diet. Now, when it comes to phytates and things like wheat, if you're eating bread, the better source of bread to really reduce the phytic acid content is your sourdough bread, where it's been fermented. It lowers the amount of phytic acid. When you come to oxalic acid with spinach and rhubarb, don't have raw spinach leaves in salads, and don't put raw spinach into a smoothie, because the phytic acid levels is much higher when it's raw and it's reduced when it's cooked. I wouldn't eat spinach in excess. We think of spinach being high in iron, but the problem is the oxalic acid binding to those minerals, whether it's iron, calcium, potassium, magnesium, that really reduces the amount available. So do eat some spinach, but just don't eat it every day. Have it cooked and don't have it raw. When it comes to things like nuts and seeds and even things like oats, then one way that you can reduce the phytic acid level is to soak and then rinse these overnight. Well, you wouldn't necessarily be rinsing oats, but certainly nuts and seeds, you can soak them and then rinse them before you eat them. In fact, I find things like almonds taste so much nicer when you have soaked them. They've got a creamier, smoother sort of consistency. Whether that's because it reduces the phytic acid content, I'm not completely sure, but you can certainly soak and then rinse nuts and seeds. You can buy sprouted nuts and seeds. That's also reduced the phytic acid content as well. And my final step in this is thinking about feeding your gut microbiome. Yet again, I'm coming back to the gut, but there are certain strains of bacteria that may enhance the ability to absorb calcium from the gut into the bloodstream. One of the most well-known studied here is Lactobacillus acidophilus. It's a very well-known strain. You find that in supplements, commonly Lactobacillus acidophilus. And studies that have been done on menopausal women with osteoporosis have been found that they're lacking this type of bacteria. So it's not just about one strain of bacteria. We need to be supporting all the beneficial bacteria in our gut. It goes back to feeding the gut microbiome. How do we do that? Then we need to be having a really high plant-based diet. We need to be thinking about those polyphenol compounds found in things like berries and pomegranate, things like apple and stewed apple, and having a very, very diverse plant. You know, there's no one plant food that's going to be better than another. We've got to be consistently and constantly feeding our gut microbiome by really eating a very, very diverse 10 a day plant-based diet as much as possible. So I hope that these 5 steps has raised your awareness as why it's so important that you don't just think about dairy, you don't just think about calcium, you think about all these other foods that you can be eating and how we need to balance them and maximize not just the take up of calcium and magnesium from the gut and into the bloodstream, but then how we maximize the uptake of the calcium and into bones, and try and keep that calcium in the bones and not get it broken down where it can be deposited elsewhere in the body. So thank you for watching tonight. I will be back next Tuesday for another live. Please let me know if you're following this and watching it in my Facebook group. Please drop me a note in the post after this has gone live. If there's other topics you'd like me to talk about, please let me know. I'm always open to suggestions. It's very helpful for me to know what's of interest to you. So thank you for watching. Hope you have a great week. Hope the sun starts shining again. Get those arms out there for a little bit. Don't get them burned, but they need to be out there without the suntan lotion on. Have a great week, everybody. Bye for now.